Okay, so I'm going to be working on the floor today, so the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I have my jack stands positioned correctly so that I can get under the vehicle safely. So the crank sensor is located above the axle. You're going to find a metal shield that is held on by a 10mm and a 13mm. So get a small ratchet that can fit in there, and you're going to loosen those up, and the crankshaft position sensor should be under there, as well as a wiring harness. So let's take that out. So take a short 1/4" ratchet with a 10mm attached and loosen up the bolt, and then finish up loosening up the bolt with your hand, and do that with the 10mm and the 13mm bolt. So when you take that 13mm bolt out, you're going to bend the shield a little bit so you can be able to see the crank sensor. Just bend it out the way to where you can bend it back and it'll still be in its place. So that is the crank sensor. What you're going to do is you're going to take it out of the connector by pressing on the tab, and then you're going to loosen it up by the 10mm bolt that attaches to it. So grab the crank sensor by the top and give it a twist, and it should come out. Okay, this sensor is composed of 3 pins: the 5V reference, the ground, and the crank signal going back to the PCM. So before installing the new sensor, make sure you put assembly lube on it, on the O-ring, so that it goes in smoother and you don't run the risk of damaging the O-ring. So you're going to install your crank sensor. You're going to locate where the fitting is for the crank sensor, and then you're going to install it by placing it into the hole. You got to fill with your finger, and you're going to press downwards on the crank sensor with your index finger to make sure that the O-ring completely seated on the block. Okay, once you verify that, you're going to twist it and align it to where the 10mm bolt goes. Make sure to connect the connector fully on the sensor. You can verify this by hearing the clicking sound on the connector. If you leave the connector loose, you run the risk of having intermittent conditions and drivability concerns, so make sure you plug in the sensor fully. Before I go forward, I'm going to connect my oscilloscope to the crank sensor signal going to the PCM to make sure I do have signal before I put everything back. So I have a probe connected to the crank signal going to the PCM that determines the crank position. I'm going to connect it to my oscilloscope, and I'm going to have the vehicle be cranked up, and I should see a signal. So let's see. There we go, I see a signal. But my probe got out of position a little bit. Let me position it back in place, and we should see signal again. There we go. Okay, so now we can install our shield back. Make sure you tighten the 13mm bolt and the 10mm bolt. And make sure you subscribe to my channel, guys. And if you have any ideas on any future videos you think I could do, just leave a comment, and I'll be looking forward to it. Thanks.